Ruth Moskovich was the 10th and last child in a large family of immigrants Jacob and Ida Moskvich. The last pregnancy and childbirth were difficult for Ida. She was unable to take care of the child. The newborn girl, named Ruth, was taken by the eldest married daughter of the Muscovites, Sarah. Growing up, Ruth perceived her parents as grandparents and was attached to Sarah as a mother. After school, she ran to the cafeteria, where she helped her sister as much as she could from the age of 8. She was both a cleaner, a waitress, and a cashier, and she did this with great pleasure. She liked to feel like an adult, accept bills and count out change, chat with visitors. Ruth learned how to advertise new drinks long before she learned the words management and marketing, and then she never tired of repeating that she went through her universities in a small cafeteria. Young Ruth met the future artist Ruth Handler, who studied art at the Denver Art College. In 1938, they got married and decided to escape from boring Denver to Hollywood. 22-year-old Ruth dreamed of an acting career. She sang and danced well, and Elliot was going to conquer the world with his art. But nothing came of it. Ruth started her career as a secretary at Paramount Pictures. Elliot discovered that no one needed his paintings and rented a room above the laundry room, where he made picture frames. From the remnants of wood, he began to make dollhouses with chairs, tables, and other furniture for fun. He took his first batch of doll furniture to the hat shop next door. It seemed to him that wealthy ladies trying on hats could buy these houses for their daughters. He received the first real money for them, and the first scolding from Ruth. She believed that doll houses would be better sold in a toy store. With the next batch of houses, Ruth went to the store herself. Having knocked out a fixed price for them, 5 times higher than the original one, she mockingly put the earnings in front of her husband. In the merchant sphere, she felt like a fish in water. On the weekend, she took the cheapest ticket to New York and, in an elegant navy suit with a notebook, headed to the mecca of toy dealers, the famous toy building on Fifth Avenue. She smiled at everyone and agreed to have coffee with the mustachioed owner of a factory for the production of toy locomotives. An enterprising young lady found out and wrote down the following in a notebook. Teddy Bear was invented in 1902, Yo-Yo. In 1936, Lionel Train in 1933, and Anne and Andy dolls, which are put on the arm in 1915. Ruth decided to repeat someone else's success. The main thing is that she realized that all toys, like teddy bears, were made by hand, so it's not worth repeating their thorny path. After all, plastic has already been invented, and it needs to be adapted to the case. I made a mold, and cast as much as you want, and faster and more profitable. Moreover, now is the time. The war is over. The soldiers have returned home. They want to start families, have children. And what do children need? Of course, high quality and inexpensive toys. In a rented garage, she, her husband, and his friend Harold Matson set up a workbench with tools and organized the Mattel company. Elliot designed and painted toys, and Ruth sold them. Their first success was a tiny ukulele. Then they made a toy piano, then a musical cradle with the song, "Go to Sleep, Baby." Their toys were in great demand. In 10 years, Mattel has become the 3rd largest toy manufacturer in the world. Elliot turned out to be a genius at toy making, and Ruth turned out to be a genius at sales. They bought a mansion in a fashionable part of Los Angeles. Ruth and Elliot named their children Barbara and Ken. In 1956, the couple went on vacation to Europe for 2 months. In a small souvenir shop in the alpine town of Lucerne, Ruth came across a doll that was destined to turn her life around. The doll turned out to be German-made and did not look at all like those dolls that were sold in America. Her name was Lily. She was 11 inches tall, and she was a curvy blonde who had 6 fashionable ski suits. Ruth thought about it. Let the doll be an adult girl who can change outfits and not a boring angelic baby. Her idea was initially ridiculed. Girls will not be able to associate themselves with an adult doll. No one will buy a doll. The products of 1,600 toy factories were presented at the toy fair. 15,000 sellers sent their representatives to the fair. At the Mattel stand, there was a pretty, slightly arrogant blonde, and the same brunette with a wasp waist in a striped black and white swimsuit, made up in earrings with a fleece and a long ponytail tied with an elastic band. The doll was called Barbie, a teenage model. One of the owners of the chain of stores sharply besieged Ruth. "Who told you to make a doll with breasts? I'm too embarrassed to buy one for myself." When she got home, Ruth burst into tears. "We are ruined." She believed in Barbie's success so much that she ordered a small batch of dolls in Japan. When the dolls arrived, Ruth gasped. They were perfect. They had gorgeous hair, just like the real thing. Ruth hired a special hairdresser who experimented with the hairstyles of future dolls. "I had to involve a fashion designer. He sewed a whole wardrobe for Barbie. Dresses, jackets, suits. All the clothes were of amazing quality. Zippers, clasps, buttons, pockets, darts." Ruth Handler created a new image for her doll, focusing on the incredibly popular actress Jane Mansfield in the 50s, a bright blonde with a moody character who adored luxury and pink. A buxom diva turned her mansion into a pink dollhouse with cupids and hearts. Ruth Handler created the same one for her doll. In 1958, she received a patent for her toy and gave it the name of her daughter, Barbie. Ruth launched an advertisement on television. After that, several 100,000 dolls flew away in an instant. From 1959 to 1964, Mattel sales exceeded 96 million. It wasn't that the children liked Barbie, but also Ruth's brilliant idea. No doll had so many additional accessories that parents had to fork out for. Each Barbie could buy a whole wardrobe of clothes and a lot of other necessities, from a red Ferrari to a dollhouse. In addition, Barbie had friends: boyfriend Ken, girlfriend Midge. The girlfriend has her own boyfriend Alan. They had their own ponies, Dallas and Dixie. Barbie has been a flight attendant, a ballerina, a nurse, the editor-in-chief of a fashion magazine, a surgeon, a hippie, a rapper, and an astronaut. Money flowed like a river. They had to be spent somewhere. Mattel moved into a new luxury office, changed the design team, hired new financial consultants, Harvard graduates. Mattel began to buy everything in a row: a company that produces audio cassettes to produce audio fairy tales, a company that produces animal products, a company that deals with equipment for playgrounds, and even a circus. Moreover, she was looking at the Warner Brothers film company. She could afford it. And then Ruth discovered that her husband, a talented designer who was always coming up with something new, was appreciated at work, and she herself was barely tolerated in her own company. She was scolded by the young sales geniuses on the board of directors. Many did not hide and openly said that they did not understand why the corporation needed this restless aunt with a smoky voice. For the time being, Ruth was sure that nothing bad could happen to her or the company. She gave interviews left and right. "I am a superwoman. You can make new dolls from me. I'm made of steel." From some point on, everything went wrong. First, in 1968, Mattel suppliers went on strike for a long time. Then the main warehouse in Mexico burned down. A fire destroyed toy stocks a couple of weeks before Christmas. Mattel disrupted deliveries and lost millions. Then Ruth was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent surgery. Many years later, Ruth said, "I stopped feeling like a woman. That was the scariest thing. It seemed to me that I was destroyed." She was afraid to show up at work, walked around in a double-breasted baggy suit hiding her missing breasts. The company is still suffering losses. Ruth returned to the company, but held the post of president only nominally. And in 1978, a new blow awaited her. Mrs. Handler was accused of securities fraud. She was tried and sentenced to 5 years probation and a fine. The harassment in the media began, and she was removed from the management of the company. Ruth looked at her Barbie dolls, standing silently in a glass-enclosed closet, and thought, "It's probably not for nothing." No wonder Ruth was so accused by feminists. Because of her Barbie, girls exhaust themselves with diets and faint with hunger, just to get closer to an unattainable ideal. The ideal was indeed unattainable. If you imagine an adult girl with Barbie's parameters, then her proportions will look like this: 85 to 45, 70. Girls all over the world are being treated with the diagnosis of Barbie syndrome, and it's her fault, Ruth. And of course, it's her fault that the doll hid her own daughter from her. Of course, busy with business, she did not pay enough attention to the children. Daughter Barbara was left to her own devices and hated the damn doll. The fact that she and her brother Ken were considered husband and wife. Of course, you are Barbie and Ken. It didn't add joy either. The daughter accused her mother that the doll took away all her attention, and Barbara had to match the fashionista and beauty Barbie, named after her all her life. She was on a severe diet, suffered from debilitating depression, and could not forgive her mother for condemning her to all this. Ruth stayed at home and grieved. Her life turned into a series of dreary days without hope and enlightenment. Who would have thought that finding a breast prosthesis would be her salvation? What was offered to her was of disgusting quality, unpleasant to the touch, heavy, and for some reason expensive. And it also fell out of the bra. The manufacturers did not make all sizes. Ruth decided to deal with a delicate problem on her own. She found a specialist named Peyton who made custom prostheses and suggested that he create a joint venture. Ruth called him Ruthon. Their prosthetics became popular. Even former First Lady Betty Ford, the widow of President Gerald Ford, wore and advertised them. In a year, Ruth earned her first million and realized that her self-esteem was back in place. She started from scratch. She won again. Her story has become an example for many that even the most difficult situations can be solved. In 1991, she sold Ruth and profitably. She was already 75. You can relax. Every week, a carefully coiffed, well-groomed, and very cheerful old lady went out to play poker with her friends. She rarely left her mansion and finally reconciled with her daughter. In 2002, 85-year-old Ruth Handler left this world. Elliot outlived his wife by 9 years.